It was over. The ink on the divorce papers was practically dry, and Bella knew she had lost. She was sitting in courtroom 4B, watching her husband, a man the world thought was a saint, smile that charming, predatory smile at the judge. The gavel was raised. The final ruling that would strip her of her home, her dignity, and worst of all her daughter, was seconds away. The air in the room was stale heavy with the scent of cheap coffee and impending doom. But then a sound shattered the silence. Not a scream, not a gunshot, just a phone ringing in the clerk's hand. That single jarring ring didn't just stop a hearing, it unearthed a secret that had been buried in a shallow grave for 12 years. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. That's what Catherine "Cat" Prentice thought as she stared out the window of the rideshare, watching the grey skyline blur into a watercolor of misery. Today was the day. Tuesday, November the 14th. The day her life, or at least the life she had been allowed to borrow, was scheduled to be dismantled by the Honourable Judge Frederick Halloway. "You okay back there, miss?" the driver asked. His eyes flitted to the rear-view mirror. He saw a woman in her late 30s, pale with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She was wearing a navy blazer that used to fit perfectly, but now hung loose on her shoulders. Stress is the most effective diet plan, and Cat had been on it for 18 months. "I'm fine," Cat lied. It was a reflex by now. Just big day. She checked her phone. 3 missed messages from her lawyer, Benji Roth. Benji was a good man, a scrappy fighter from the South Side who wore suits that were slightly too shiny. But he was out of his league. They both were. They were up against Jonathan Prentice. Jonathan. Just thinking his name made Cat's stomach twist. To the public, Jonathan Prentice was the golden boy of the Pacific Northwest tech scene. He was the founder of Aura Stream, a company that revolutionized data compression. He was a philanthropist who donated millions to children's hospitals. He was the man who had charmed Cat 7 years ago at a charity gala, sweeping her off her feet with the intensity that felt like love, but turned out to be ownership. No one saw the Jonathan that Cat lived with. The Jonathan who tracked her car's mileage to the decimal point. The Jonathan who had slowly, methodically isolated her from her friends, her family, and eventually her own sanity. When she finally filed for divorce, she thought she was escaping. Instead, she had walked into a trap. Jonathan didn't just want to leave her. He wanted to destroy her credibility. He had painted a masterpiece of fiction for the court. Cat was unstable. Cat was an alcoholic. Cat was paranoid. And he had the receipts to prove it, or rather, forged digital footprints that looked terrifyingly real. The car pulled up to the King County Courthouse. The building loomed like a fortress. Cat stepped out into the drizzle. Benji was waiting by the steps, smoking a cigarette with a ferocity that suggested he wished it were something stronger. "He's already inside," Benji said, tossing the butt and grinding it out with his heel. "He's got that shark, Linda Hemlock, with him. And Cat. They have a new witness." Cat froze. "Who?" "They won't say. Surprise witness. Judge Halloway allowed it this morning. Unusual, but Jonathan's team pulled some strings." Benji looked at her, his expression grim. "They're going for the jugular, Cat. They want full custody of Sophie. No visitation." Sophie, her 5-year-old daughter, the only thing in this world that made sense. "He can't take her, Benji," Cat whispered, her voice trembling. He doesn't even know her favorite color. He treats her like a prop for his Instagram. I know, Benji said, placing a hand on her shoulder. But in there, the truth doesn't matter. The narrative matters, and right now their narrative is that you are a danger to that child. They walked through the metal detectors, the beeping sounds echoing like hospital monitors. As they approached courtroom 4, B-Cat saw him. Jonathan was standing by the water fountain, laughing at something Linda Hemlock had said. He looked impeccable in a charcoal bespoke suit, his silver fox hair perfectly coiffed. He looked like a senator, like a movie star. He spotted Cat. The smile didn't leave his face but his eyes. His eyes went dead. It was a look only she knew. It was the look he gave her when she burned the toast or spoke too loudly at a dinner party. You are nothing, that look said. And soon everyone will know it. Cat gripped her purse so hard her knuckles turned white. She walked past him, refusing to make eye contact. But as she passed, he leaned in his voice, a low, smooth baritone. Say goodbye to her room, Cat. I'm turning it into a gym. It took everything in her not to scream. She pushed through the heavy oak doors, entering the arena where her execution was scheduled to begin. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old paper. Judge Frederick Halloway sat on the bench, a man known for his impatience and his bias toward stable financial providers. In this case, that was Jonathan. The morning session was a bloodbath. Linda Hemlock, Jonathan's attorney, was surgical. She was a tall, severe woman who moved around the courtroom like a panther stalking a wounded deer. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. She just presented facts. Your Honor, Linda purred, holding up a stack of documents. We have bank statements here showing Mrs. Prentice spent over $5,000 at a liquor store in a 3-month period. That's a lie. Cat stood up, unable to help herself. He bought that. He used my card. Sit down, Mrs. Prentice. Judge Halloway snapped, peering over his spectacles. Mr. Roth, control your client. Benji pulled her down. Cat, please. You have to stay calm. Outbursts help them. But how could she stay calm? Jonathan had taken her credit cards, bought cases of expensive wine for his business parties, and simply billed them to her account. It was so simple, yet so damning. Then came the medical records. We have a statement here from Dr. Aris Thorne, Linda continued, a psychiatrist Mrs. Prentice saw briefly in 2022. He notes patterns of delusional paranoia and narcissistic rage. Cat turned to Benji, her eyes wide with horror. I never saw a Dr. Thorne. Who is that? Benji was scribbling furiously. I know. It's a hired gun. But refuting it takes time we don't have. Then it was Jonathan's turn to take the stand. If Linda was the surgeon, Jonathan was the artist. He didn't play the angry husband. He played the concerned husband, the heartbroken savior. He sat in the witness box, hands clasped humbly in his lap. He looked at the judge with wet, pleading eyes. I love Catherine, Jonathan said softly. I really do. When we met, she was vibrant. But the addiction took her. I tried to get her help. I hired nannies to protect Sophie when Catherine was incapacitated. I covered up the incidents because I didn't want to embarrass her. Can you describe one of these incidents? Linda asked gently. Jonathan sighed, looking down as if the memory pained him. Last Christmas, Sophie was opening her presents. Catherine. She was disoriented. She started screaming that there were cameras in the dollhouse. She smashed it. Sophie was terrified. I had to take Sophie to a hotel that night. The courtroom was silent. The court reporter's typing was the only sound. Kat felt like she couldn't breathe. That incident had happened, but not like that. Jonathan had told her there were cameras. He had gaslit her for weeks, moving things in the house, whispering things through the baby monitor until she snapped. He had engineered the breakdown, recorded the aftermath, and now he was serving it up as proof of her insanity. I just want my daughter to be safe. Jonathan finished, wiping a single perfect tear from his cheek. I want Catherine to get help, but she cannot be around Sophie. Not like this. Judge Halloway nodded, clearly moved. Thank you, Mr. Prentice. You may step down. Benji stood up for the cross-examination, but he looked defeated. He asked about Jonathan's offshore accounts, about the inconsistencies in the dates. Jonathan parried every question with a smile and a polite, confusing answer. Mr. Roth, Jonathan said, I understand you are doing your job, but my finances are audited by the IRS. There is nothing to hide. I'm afraid Catherine has led you on a wild goose chase. By the lunch recess, Kat felt like a ghost. She sat on a bench in the hallway, staring at the floor. He's going to win, she whispered. Benji sat next to her, loosening his tie. We have one shot left. Your testimony. You have to make the judge feel your fear, Kat. You have to make him see the manipulator behind the mask. He doesn't see me, Kat said. No one does. Jonathan owns the light. I'm just the shadow he casts. As they went back inside for the afternoon session, the atmosphere shifted. The rain was hammering against the windows now, a relentless drumbeat. Call your next witness, Judge Halloway said, looking at his watch. He was bored. He had already made up his mind. The defense calls Catherine Prentice, Benji announced. Kat walked to the stand. She swore to tell the truth. But as she looked out at the courtroom, at Jonathan's smug face, at the judge's impatient glare, she realized that in this room, the truth was just another story, and Jonathan was a better storyteller. Kat's testimony was a disaster. She tried to explain the gaslighting. She tried to explain the financial abuse. But every time she spoke, she sounded frantic. She sounded exactly like the paranoid woman Jonathan had described. He moves my keys, Kat stammered. He changes the passwords on my email and then tells me I forgot them. He told me my mother called when she didn't. Mrs. Prentice, Judge Halloway interrupted. Do you have any proof of these password changes? Any logs? No. Kat said, her voice rising. He's a tech genius. He knows how to hide his tracks. So it's a conspiracy? Linda Hemlock asked during cross-examination, raising an eyebrow. Your husband, a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, has time to hide your car keys. Yes, Kat cried out. Linda smirked. No further questions. It was 3:45 p.m. The closing arguments were short. Benji gave a passionate speech about the subtle nature of emotional abuse, but it landed on deaf ears. Linda Hemlock simply gestured to the pile of evidence, the liquor store receipts, the doctor's note, the recording of Kat screaming about the dollhouse. The facts are clear, Your Honor, Linda said. For the safety of the child's sole custody must be awarded to the father. Judge Halloway shuffled his papers. He took a sip of water. He looked at Kat, not with sympathy, but with pity. The kind of pity you give a rabid dog before you put it down. I have heard the arguments. Halloway began, his voice booming. This is a tragic case, but the court's primary concern is the welfare of Sophie Prentice. The evidence presented by the petitioner regarding the respondent's mental instability is overwhelming. Kat stopped breathing. The world narrowed down to the judge's lips. Therefore, Halloway continued, picking up his gavel, I am prepared to rule. I find that it is in the best interest of the child to grant full legal and physical custody to Mr. Jonathan Prentice, effective immediately. Mrs. Prentice is to have supervised visitation only pending a full psychiatric evaluation. Jonathan didn't cheer. He just lowered his head, feigning relief. "I will now sign the order," Halloway said. He raised the gavel to signal the end of the session. Kat's heart shattered. It was physical pain, sharp and blinding. She was going to lose Sophie. Tonight, her daughter would be in that big, cold house with a man who viewed people as possessions. The judge's hand was in the air. The wood was about to strike the block. Ring. The sound was shrill and unexpected. It wasn't a cell phone in the gallery. It was the landline phone on the desk of the court clerk, a young woman named Bella, ironically, who sat just below the judge. Judge Halloway froze the gavel, hovering inches from the block. He glared down at the clerk. "Ms. Evans, I thought I ordered all phones silenced." It's the emergency line, Your Honor." The clerk stammered, looking terrified. "It never rings." The room went deadly silent. Even Jonathan looked up, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. The clerk picked up the receiver. Her hand was shaking. "Courtroom 4B. Yes, who?" She went pale. All the color drained from her face in an instant. She looked up at the judge, her eyes wide as saucers. She didn't cover the mouthpiece. "Your Honor," the clerk whispered, her voice trembling so hard it cracked. "You need to take this, immediately." "I'm in the middle of a ruling," Halloway barked. "Take a message." "No, Your Honor." The clerk stood up. The caller says he's calling from the morgue, but he's not the coroner." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Jonathan Prentice straightened his tie, his eyes narrowing. "What is this nonsense?" Jonathan muttered to Linda. "The caller says," the clerk continued, her eyes locking onto Jonathan Prentice, "that his name is Elias Vane, and he says he wants to know why Jonathan Prentice buried him in Nevada 6 years ago." The silence that followed was not the silence of a courtroom. It was the silence of a tomb being cracked open. Kat looked at Jonathan. For the first time in 7 years, the mask didn't just slip. It shattered. Jonathan Prentice, the man of ice and steel, looked like he had seen a ghost. His skin turned a waxen grey. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Judge Halloway slowly lowered the gavel, but he did not strike the block. He reached for the phone. Judge Halloway was a man of procedure. He liked order. He liked schedules. He detested surprises. But the look on Jonathan Prentice's face, a look of sheer, unadulterated terror, triggered an instinct in the judge that went beyond the law. It was the instinct of a man realizing he was being played. Halloway held the receiver to his ear, his eyes never leaving Jonathan. "This is Judge Frederick Halloway," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Identify yourself." There was a pause. Then the judge reached out and pressed the speaker button on the bass unit. A voice filled the courtroom. It wasn't the smooth, polished baritone of the lawyers. It was a voice like grinding gravel horse, tired and crackling with static. "Hello, Judge," the voice rasped. "My name is Elias Vane, and if my former boss, Jonathan, hasn't vomited on his expensive Italian shoes yet, he's about to." "This is outrageous," Jonathan shouted, leaping to his feet. The charm was gone. Veins bulged in his neck. "This is a prank, a deep fake. My wife has hired someone to—" "Sit down, Mr. Prentice," Halloway roared. The sheer volume of the judge's voice shook the walls. "Bailiff, if he stands again, restrain him." The bailiff, a burly man who had spent the last 3 hours bored out of his mind, stepped forward, his hand hovering near his belt. Jonathan sat, but his hands were shaking violently. He gripped the table, his knuckles turning the color of bone. "Mr. Vane," the judge said, addressing the speakerphone, "you claim to be a man who is legally deceased. Explain yourself, or I will trace this call and have you arrested for obstruction of justice." "Oh, I'm legally dead, all right." Elias chuckled a dry, humorless sound. "October 14th, 2017. Car accident in the Nevada desert. Closed casket. Very tragic. Jonathan even paid for the flowers. Didn't you, Johnny?" The courtroom was frozen. Kat looked from the phone to Jonathan. She remembered that name. Elias. He was the grim-faced man who used to come over late at night to fix Jonathan's servers. Jonathan had told her Elias died of a drug overdose. "I was Jonathan's CTO," Elias continued. "Chief Technical Officer. But really I was his cleaner. When Jonathan wanted a competitor's site to crash, I did it. When he wanted to scrub his search history, I did it. And 6 years ago, when he wanted to fake an embezzlement scheme to frame his co-founder, I did that too." "Lies," Jonathan hissed. "He's a disgruntled employee." "I disappeared because I knew too much," Elias said. "Jonathan gave me 2 choices, a shallow grave or a new life with a monthly stipend. I took the money. I moved to Mexico. I stayed dead. But yesterday the money stopped." The room turned to look at Jonathan. "You got greedy, Johnny," Elias said, his voice dripping with venom. "You thought enough time had passed. You thought I was a loose end you could finally cut. But you forgot one thing. I'm the one who built your security system. I kept a back door. And I've been watching you." Linda Hemlock. Jonathan's shark of a lawyer was slowly inching her chair away from her client. She was a ruthless attorney, but she wasn't stupid. She knew the smell of a sinking ship. "Mr. Vane," Judge Holloway said, his voice steady but tense. "These are serious allegations, but this is a family court. Unless this pertains to the custody of Sophie Prentice, this is a matter for the police." "It pertains to everything," Elias snapped. "Why do you think Jonathan is winning this case, Judge? Do you think he's a good father?" "The man is a sociopath. He doesn't love that kid. He just wants to win. And to win, he needed to make his wife look crazy." Kat felt a sore catch in her throat. He knows. "Ask him about the gaslight protocol, Judge," Elias said. "The what?" Holloway asked. "The gaslight protocol. It's a script I wrote for him 5 years ago. It allows remote access to the smart home system. Lights, locks, temperature, audio. It logs everything, but it edits the user out. It makes it look like ghosts are doing it." Elias paused for effect. "I just sent an email to your clerk, Judge. It contains the raw server logs for the Prentice residence for the last 12 months. Open it." The clerk, Bella, was already typing furiously. Her face was pale, illuminated by the glow of her monitor. "I have it, Your Honor," she whispered. It's a massive file." "Open the folder marked Dollhouse Incident," Elias commanded through the speaker. The clerk clicked. A video file popped up on the large monitors mounted on the courtroom wall's monitors that were usually used to display financial spreadsheets. The video started. It was the footage from the living room camera. It showed Kat and Sophie playing. Kat looked happy. Sophie was laughing. Then the audio cut in. A strange, whispering voice coming from the corner of the room. "Mummy hates you, Sophie. Mummy wants to hurt you." On the screen, Kat whipped her head around, terrified. "Who said that?" Sophie started crying. Then the lights in the room began to strobe violently. In the courtroom, The real Kat covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "I told you," she choked out. "I told you the lights were flashing." The video continued. Kat was screaming, smashing the dollhouse where the voice seemed to be coming from, trying to find the speaker. But then the video changed. "Now," Elias said, "look at the metadata on the right side of the screen." The clerk highlighted a column of text running alongside the video. "User admin _J_PRENTISS action audio _INJECT_SOURCE_04 action lighting _STROBE_PATTERN_B location IP _ADDRESS_MOBILE Jonathan's iPhone. The text was undeniable. At the exact moment Kat was losing her mind, Jonathan Prentice was logged into the system, controlling the lights and the voice from his phone. The video ended. The silence in courtroom 4B was heavy, suffocating. It was the silence of a truth so ugly it sucked the air out of the room. Judge Holloway looked at the screen. Then he looked at Kat. The pity in his eyes was gone, replaced by a profound, burning shame. He had almost handed a child over to a monster. He turned his gaze slowly to Jonathan. Jonathan Prentice was no longer the golden boy. He was a cornered rat. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "This is illegal!" Jonathan screamed, his voice cracking. "That evidence was obtained illegally. You can't use this. I'll sue this court. I'll buy this entire building and burn it down." "Mr. Prentice," Judge Holloway said, his voice deadly calm. "Sit down." "No." Jonathan looked toward the door. "I'm leaving. This hearing is over." "Bailiff," Holloway barked. "Lock the doors. No one leaves this room." The heavy oak doors slammed shut with a boom that echoed like a gunshot. The lock clicked. Jonathan spun around, his eyes wild. He looked at Linda Hemlock. "Do something!" Linda stood up, smoothed her skirt, and looked Jonathan dead in the eye. "Mr. Prentice, I am withdrawing as your counsel effective immediately. I will not be a party to fraud and criminal endangerment." She walked over to the bench and sat down, crossing her arms. Jonathan was alone. "One more thing." Elias's voice crackled from the phone. "I also sent the unedited bank records, the ones that showed Jonathan buying the vodka he claimed Catherine drank, and the transfers to Dr. Aris Thorne." Benji Roth, who had been stunned into silence, suddenly slammed his hand on the table. "The psychiatrist. He bought the diagnosis. $50,000, Elias confirmed, wired to an account in the Caymans 3 days before the evaluation. Kat felt a wave of dizziness. It was all unraveling. Every lie, every gaslight, every moment she had doubted her own sanity was being dismantled in real time. She wasn't crazy. She had been hunted. Judge Holloway picked up the phone again. "Mr. Vane, remain on the line. I am having the district attorney patched in." The judge looked at the bailiff. "Take Mr. Prentice into custody." Jonathan backed away as the bailiff approached. "Don't touch me. Do you know who I am? I am Aura Stream. I am a pillar of this community." "You are a fraud, sir," the bailiff said, unhooking his handcuffs. "Turn around." Jonathan's eyes darted around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. He found only the cold stares of strangers and the tear-filled, furious eyes of the wife he had tried to destroy. He lunged, not at the bailiff, at Kat. It happened in slow motion, yet too fast to stop. Jonathan, realizing his life was over, defaulted to the only thing he had left: rage. Pure narcissistic rage. If he couldn't own Kat, he would break her one last time. He leaped over the partition separating the tables. "You bitch!" he screamed, his hands reaching for her throat. "You ruined everything's—" Benji Roth, the scrappy lawyer from the South Side, moved faster than anyone expected. He didn't have the size of the bailiff, but he had the adrenaline of a man watching a bully attack a defenseless woman. Benji threw a shoulder into Jonathan's midsection, tackling him to the floor, just inches from Kat. They crashed into the table, sending pitchers of water and legal pads flying. "Get off me!" Jonathan howled, thrashing wildly. The bailiff was there a second later, driving his knee into Jonathan's back and wrenching his arms behind him. The click of the handcuffs was the sweetest sound Kat had ever heard. "Get him up!" Judge Holloway shouted, standing on the bench, his face red with fury. "Get him out of my sight!" Jonathan was hauled to his feet. His nose was bleeding from the impact. His perfect suit was wet and crumpled. He looked at Kat, his eyes filled with a terrifying emptiness. "You'll never be safe," he spat blood on his teeth. "I have money you can't even imagine. I'll buy my way out, and then I'm coming for Sophie." Kat stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she forced them to hold her weight. She walked around the table until she was face to face with him. She was close enough to smell his expensive cologne, now mixed with the metallic scent of blood and sweat. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She leaned in her voice, a whisper that carried more power than his shouting ever had. "You don't have money anymore, Jonathan," she said. "You have evidence against you, and you don't have Sophie. You never did." The bailiff dragged him away. Jonathan continued to scream obscenities until the heavy door cut off his voice. The room fell into a stunned silence. The only sound was the speakerphone, where the faint sound of Elias Vane breathing could be heard. "Nice tackle," Elias said. Judge Holloway sat down heavily. He took a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his forehead. He looked old suddenly. The weight of his near-fatal error was pressing down on him. "Mrs. Prentice," the judge said softly. Kat looked up. "Yes, Your Honor." "I—" The judge paused. Judges do not apologize often. It undermines the authority of the court. But Holloway was a human being first. "I owe you a profound apology. The court system relies on the assumption of good faith. Your husband weaponized that faith." He shuffled the papers on his desk, the ruling he had been about to sign, and tore them in half. The sound of the ripping paper echoed in the quiet room. "I am vacating my previous findings," Holloway announced, his voice regaining its strength. "Based on the new evidence provided by the witness and the dramatic events we just witnessed, I am issuing an immediate temporary order." He looked at the clerk. "Write this down. Sole legal and physical custody of Sophie Prentice is awarded to the mother, Catherine Prentice. Mr. Jonathan Prentice is to have no contact, direct or indirect, with the child or the mother. I am also issuing a lifetime restraining order, effective immediately." Kat grabbed Benji's hand. Benji squeezed back his hand, still trembling from the fight. "Furthermore," Holloway continued, "I am freezing all of Mr. Prentice's assets, pending a forensic accounting investigation. If this gaslight protocol is real, and if he paid for a false diagnosis, we are looking at fraud, perjury, wiretapping, and child endangerment. He won't be buying his way out of anything." The judge turned to the speakerphone. "Mr. Vane." "Still here, Judge." "You are technically a fugitive, and you have admitted to aiding in criminal activities," Halloway said sternly. However, given your cooperation and the lives you have likely saved today, I am willing to speak to the district attorney about a plea deal. Witness protection might be on the table. I'm tired of running judge. Elias sighed. I'll turn myself in at the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City within the hour. Just make sure Johnny doesn't get bail. I'll see to it personally, Halloway promised. The line went dead. Court is adjourned, the judge said, slamming the gavel down. This time the sound wasn't a death knell. It was a liberation. Kat didn't wait. She turned to Benji. I need to get Sophie. He said he was turning her room into a gym. He might have someone there. Let's go, Benji said. The police are already on their way to your house to secure the scene, but we should be there. They ran out of the courtroom, past the stunned reporters who were just starting to hear rumors of the arrest, past the metal detectors, and out into the rain. The rain was still falling, but to Kat it didn't look gloomy anymore. It looked like a baptism. It was washing away the filth of the last 7 years. They jumped into Benji's battered sedan. As they peeled away from the curb, Kat's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Check the safe in the master bedroom closet. Code 8844. It's not just money, it's leverage. Elias. Even from thousands of miles away, he was giving her the keys to her freedom. Benji, drive faster, Kat said, staring at the message. We're doing 60 in a 30, Kat. Faster. She had won the battle in the courtroom, but the war wasn't over. Jonathan was behind bars, but his influence was deep. She needed to get to that house, get Sophie, and get that safe before Jonathan's associates did. As they turned onto the winding road leading to the Prentice estate, Kat saw headlights in the rearview mirror. A black SUV, tinted windows. It was matching their speed. Benji, Kat said, her voice tight. We're being followed. Benji looked in the mirror. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. The SUV accelerated, bumping the back of Benji's car. Jonathan might be in cuffs, but his network was still active, and they didn't want Kat finding whatever was in that safe. The road to the Prentice estate was a winding ribbon of asphalt that snaked through the dense evergreen forests of the Pacific Northwest. In the daylight it was scenic. In the dark, with blinding rain and a 2-ton SUV ramming their bumper, it was a death trap. Hang on! Benji yelled, gripping the steering wheel of his Honda Civic until his knuckles turned white. The black SUV lunged forward again, clipping the rear fender. The Honda fishtailed tires screeching in protest against the wet pavement. Benji corrected the skid, with a frantic spin of the wheel narrowly missing a guardrail that separated them from a drop into the ravine below. Who are they? Kat screamed, looking back. She could see 2 silhouettes in the front seat of the SUV. Faceless, relentless. Cleaners! Benji grunted, downshifting as they hit a hairpin turn. Jonathan's private security. If Elias is right about that safe, they're not here to hurt us. They're racing us to the house. They need to destroy whatever is in that closet before the police get a warrant. Sophie is in that house, Kat cried, the panic rising in her throat like bile. If they get there first, they won't. Benji slammed on the gas. The Honda groaned but surged forward. Benji knew these roads. He had driven out here a dozen times to serve papers Jonathan refused to sign. The SUV was faster, heavier, and more powerful, but Benji had desperation on his side. They drifted around the final curve, the wrought iron gates of the Prentice estate coming into view. They were closed. The gate code, Benji shouted. Kat, what's the code? It used to be his birthday, Kat stammered. 0412. But he might have changed it. We better hope he's a narcissist who loves his birthday. Benji didn't slow down. He rolled down the window as they skidded to a halt at the keypad. The SUV was right behind them, its headlights blinding in the rearview mirror. Benji punched in 0412. Nothing happened. "Try Sophie's birthday," Benji yelled. The SUV doors were opening. Men were getting out. He doesn't care about Sophie. Kat realized something. Try the stock price the day Aura Stream went public. 4,055. Benji punched it in. Click. The massive iron gates groaned and began to swing open slowly. "Go, go, go!" Kat screamed. Benji floored it. The car scraped through the opening gap, taking some paint off the side door. The men from the SUV ran toward the gate, but they were too late to stop the car. They jumped back into their vehicle to follow, but the gate was slow. Benji roared up the long driveway and screeched to a halt in front of the mansion. Kat was out of the door before the engine stopped. She sprinted up the steps, her heels clicking on the wet stone. She hammered on the front door. "Mrs. Gable, open up, it's Kat." Inside, she could hear the muffled sounds of a TV. Mrs. Gable, the night nanny, was slightly hard of hearing and deeply loyal to her paycheck, not necessarily to Jonathan. Kat frantically punched the code into the front door smart lock. Access denied. "He locked me out," she sobbed. Benji ran up beside her holding a tire iron he'd grabbed from his trunk. "Stand back." He swung the iron with all his might against the glass pane next to the handle. It shattered with a deafening crash. Benji reached in and unlocked the deadbolt. They burst into the foyer. It was warm, quiet, and smelled of lavender, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "Sophie!" Kat screamed, running toward the stairs. Mrs. Gable appeared from the kitchen holding a tea towel, looking terrified. "Mrs. Prentice, what on earth?" "Where is she?" Kat demanded, grabbing the woman's shoulders. She's in her room, sleeping." "Mr. Prentice called. He said you were unwell and might try to break in. He said to call security if..." "Jonathan is in handcuffs, Mrs. Gable," Benji shouted. "He's been arrested for child endangerment. Now get Sophie and take her to the kitchen. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone but the police. Do you understand?" The nanny looked at Benji's wild eyes, then at the tire iron, and nodded fast. She ran upstairs. "Kat, the safe." Benji pointed to the master bedroom. Kat ran. She burst into the room she hadn't stepped foot in for 6 months. It looked exactly the same. Cold. Pristine. A museum, not a home. She tore open the walk-in closet door. Behind the rows of Italian suits was a wall safe. Code 8844. Elias's text echoed in her mind. Her fingers trembled as she typed 8844. Beep. Click. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside there wasn't just cash. There were stacks of hard drives, a black leather ledger, and a passport, with Jonathan's photo but a different name. "He was planning to run," Kat whispered. "He knew this day might come." "Grab it all!" Benji yelled from the hallway. "They're here!" Downstairs, the front door was kicked open. Glass crunched under heavy boots. "Mrs. Prentice!" a deep voice bellowed. It was the head of security, a man named Kruger. "Come down. We just want to talk." "Don't listen to them," Benji shouted. He stood at the top of the stairs, brandishing the tire iron like a sword. Kat shoved the hard drives and the ledger into her tote bag. She grabbed the passport. She looked around for a weapon, finding only a heavy brass lamp. She ran out to the landing. Benji was blocking the stairs. Below Kruger and two other men were ascending, guns drawn, not police issue, but sleek, silenced pistols. "Mr. Roth," Kruger said calmly, "you're a smart lawyer. You know this is trespassing. Hand over the contents of the safe and we walk away. No one gets hurt." "You're not walking away," Benji said, his voice shaking but defiant. "You're accomplices to a felony. The police are 5 minutes out." "5 minutes is a long time," Kruger said. He took a step up. "Stay back," Kat screamed, holding the bag tight to her chest. "I have the ledger. I have the offshore accounts. I have the names of the judges he bribed." Kruger's eyes narrowed. "Then you definitely can't leave here." He raised his weapon. Benji didn't think. He didn't weigh the odds. He just acted. He threw the tire iron. It wasn't a graceful throw, but it was heavy. It spun through the air and struck Kruger square in the shoulder. The gun discharged the bullet, shattering a chandelier above them, raining crystal onto the stairs. Kruger grunted and stumbled back, dropping the gun. The other two men hesitated, looking up at the falling glass. And then the sound of salvation. Whoop, whoop. Blue and red lights flooded the foyer through the open door. The distinct authoritative voice of a police loudspeaker cut through the tension. "This is the King County Sheriff's Department. Drop your weapons and exit the building with your hands up." The two standing men looked at Kruger. Kruger looked at the door, then at Kat. He knew it was over. He spat on the floor, turned around, and put his hands on his head. Kat fell to her knees on the landing, the adrenaline leaving her body all at once. She felt Benji's hand on her back. "We did it, Kat," he breathed. "We actually did it." A moment later, Mrs. Gable came out of Sophie's room, holding a sleepy, confused little girl in pink pajamas. "Mommy." Sophie rubbed her eyes. Kat didn't care about the glass on the floor. She crawled over to her daughter and scooped her up, burying her face in Sophie's soft hair. "I'm here, baby," Kat sobbed, rocking her back and forth. "Mummy's here, and I'm never leaving again." The media called it the Glass House Scandal. For weeks following the raid on the Prentice estate, it was impossible to turn on a television or open a news app without seeing Jonathan Prentice's face. But it wasn't the polished, airbrushed headshot from Forbes or Wired. It was his mugshot, grainy, unflattering, with eyes that looked both furious and hollow. The unraveling of Jonathan's life was not a slow decline. It was a demolition. The ledger Kat and Benji had retrieved from the wall safe proved to be the most destructive document in Seattle's recent history. It didn't just contain proof of Jonathan's offshore accounts. It contained a detailed log of bribery. Jonathan had been donating to the re-election campaigns of 2 family court judges and a state senator, ensuring that his legal battles always tipped in his favor. The fallout was nuclear. Dr. Aris Thorne, the psychiatrist who had sold his ethics for $50,000, was arrested at the airport, attempting to board a flight to Dubai. He struck a plea deal almost immediately, testifying that Jonathan had scripted the entire psychotic break narrative. Thorne admitted that Kat Prentice was perfectly sane, while Jonathan fit the clinical criteria for severe narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathic tendencies. 6 months later, the dust was finally beginning to settle. It was a Tuesday in May, and the grey skies over Seattle had broken to reveal a stunning, crisp blue. Kat Prentice sat on a wooden bench at the edge of the marina, holding a steaming cup of tea. She looked different. The navy blazer that had swallowed her whole in the courtroom was gone. Today she wore a soft cream sweater and jeans. She had gained weight, the healthy kind, and the dark circles under her eyes had been replaced by a faint scattering of freckles from spending time in the sun. I still can't believe he tried to sue the police department from his cell, Benji Roth said, sitting down next to her. Benji had changed too. He was no longer the frazzled, chain-smoking lawyer operating out of a strip mall. He was now the lead partner of Roth and Associates, a firm dedicated to victims of financial and coercive abuse. He wore a suit that actually fit, though his tie was still slightly crooked, a trademark Kat hoped he would never lose. "He's desperate," Kat said, her voice steady. She watched a ferry boat cutting through the water in the distance. "He thinks he can still talk his way out of it. He thinks if he uses enough big words, the world will bow down again." "Not this time," Benji promised. "The forensic accounting on the gaslight protocol is airtight. The jury hated him, Kat. I mean, they hated him." When the prosecution played the audio of him terrorizing Sophie through the baby monitor, I saw a juror actually weep. He's looking at 20 years minimum. No parole. Kat took a sip of her tea. "And the house?" "Sold," Benji said, "to a tech collective that plans to gut it and turn it into a coding school for underprivileged kids. They're tearing out the smart system wiring next week. They're calling it an exorcism." Kat smiled. It was a fitting end for the fortress Jonathan had built. "Have you heard from our guardian angel?" Kat asked. Benji reached into his pocket and pulled out a crinkled postcard. It had no return address, just a picture of a pristine white sand beach with turquoise water. On the back, in messy, jagged handwriting, were 3 sentences. "The fishing is good. The Wi-Fi is non-existent. Enjoy the silence." "Elias," Kat whispered. "The district attorney honored the deal," Benji explained. "New name, new passport, and a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country. He's a ghost again, but a happy one." "He saved my life," Kat said. "I hope he catches the biggest fish in the ocean." Just then a squeal of delight erupted from the grass nearby. Sophie, now 6 years old, was chasing a golden retriever puppy named Buster. The dog was a chaotic, shedding, muddy disaster, everything Jonathan would have forbidden. Sophie tripped over her own feet, landing in the grass with a thud. For a split second, Kat flinched. The old instinct, the fear that a fall meant a lecture, that a stain meant a screaming match, flared up. But then Sophie just laughed. She rolled over, hugging the dog, her face covered in dirt and joy. "Mummy, look! Buster is eating a dandelion," Sophie yelled. "Don't let him eat the yellow ones, sweetie." Kat called back, laughing. She turned back to Benji. "You know, for years I thought I was the one who was broken. I thought my brain was failing me. I remember sitting in that closet writing notes to myself on my arm, just to remember what day it was." "That's what they do," Benji said softly. "They break your compass, so you have to use theirs." "Well?" Kat stood up, brushing a stray leaf from her jeans. "I bought a new compass." She reached into her bag and pulled out a set of keys. They weren't for a mansion. They were for a modest 2-bedroom cottage in West Seattle, with a garden that needed weeding and a fence that needed painting. A place that was imperfect, small, and entirely hers. "I'm closing on the cottage today," Kat said, her eyes shining. "It has a fireplace, and no cameras, not a single one." Benji stood up and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Kat. You beat the devil." Kat took his hand, but then pulled him into a hug. It wasn't the desperate cling of a client to a lawyer. It was the embrace of 2 soldiers who had survived the same war. "We beat him," she corrected. She walked over to Sophie, scooping her daughter up into her arms. The little girl smelled of grass and dog shampoo and sunshine. "Ready to go home, Bug?" Kat asked. To the new house, Sophie asked, her eyes wide. To the new house, Kat affirmed, where we can make as much noise as we want. As they walked toward the parking lot, the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the park. The nightmare of courtroom 4B felt like a lifetime ago. The rain had stopped. The invisible cage was dissolved. Kat Prentice didn't look back. She didn't need to check over her shoulder anymore. For the first time in 7 years, the silence around her wasn't a threat. It was peace. And that is the story of how a single phone call from a dead man dismantled an echo of lies. Kat's story is a terrifying reminder that abuse isn't always bruises and shouting. Sometimes it's silence manipulation and the slow erosion of your reality. But it's also a reminder that the truth has a way of surfacing sometimes when you least expect it. Jonathan Prentice thought he could control everything, the technology, the money, the narrative. But he forgot the human element. He forgot that people like Elias Vane have a conscience and people like Benji Roth have courage. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to make you doubt your own reality? How did you break free? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who is trapped right now. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, stay safe and trust your gut.